think people think that in entrepreneurship, success just kind of happens, and they don't realize that real success is really on the other side of failure. You have to be willing to fail to really see a lot of success. So there were some businesses that didn't go that well, right? So, and I ended up homeless 3 times, ended up losing everything 11 times, having to rebuild. But each time, I think that's what helped me fine tune everything.
Today, I'm here with Dr. Patience Dean, a hedge fund founder and financial strategist who rebuilt from homelessness multiple times before retiring in her 30s and teaching others how to create sustainable wealth. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
It's great. Well, you have a unique situation. We're going to jump into a decision that you made when you were actually 10 years old. So, can you give us a little bit about the context at the time? What was happening in your life?
So I've kind of been had an entrepreneurial mindset all the way, like, from the time I can remember. By the time I was in middle school, I was a known business consultant. So I remember just kind of having an epiphany one day, and I was just looking at how much, time people were spending working, and just doing different jobs and having to work multiple jobs and different things like that. And I remember looking myself in the mirror at 10 years old, and I said, "You will not," I'm speaking to myself, and I've said, "You will not spend your years, working and making someone else wealthy. You're going to spend your time building something that you can leave to the generations behind you." And that was kind of the catalyst behind every other, business decision, that I made going forward.
And so what were you seeing at the time? Were these like close family members or, how were you seeing that this grind wasn't necessarily the ideal situation?
So I had a situation where I had a friend in elementary school, and I remember he wanted to go to this summer camp, and his parents wouldn't pay for it. So we're talking about it, and he's like, "Patience, I really want to go to this camp, but they won't pay for it. What am I going to do?" And I was like, "Well, pay for it yourself." And he's like, "We're 10. Like, what am I going to do?" Right. So I taught him how to sell his school pictures. And he was able to sell enough, make enough money from selling his school pictures to be able to go to the summer camp. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And then all the little kids, other little kids started coming to me for things. "Hey, Patience, I like to sing. How do I turn this into income? I like to draw. How do I turn this into income?" And they would call me Payday. That was my nickname because my initials are PD. So they would call me Payday. But it was kind of like just like the beginning of it, and just kind of seeing the impact of just helping people take whatever they're good at or passionate about, and then turning it into income. And so I think that was, why I kind of just had that ingrained in me.
How did you find yourself even exposed to the concept of income then by that point?
It's interesting because I didn't have many entrepreneurs around me. I think that, I'm originally from West Africa, Liberia, and it's been said that people that are from the Bassa tribe, like, they just kind of have business in their bones. So I think it was just something that kind of just came naturally for me.
Wow, that's amazing. Anything that you can explain and how you, I guess, think about monetizing these things that these kids were coming to you with? Like, I say that because I have a daughter who's 15 and she is so upset that she can't get a job. And I, as an entrepreneur, keep trying to say, hey, well, you could make money on your own. You don't have to have a job. But sometimes it's hard to see the path to the revenue. And so, how did you arrive at being able to see the connection of like what somebody's passion is and the overlap with what somebody will pay for?
Great question. I think for me, it was just having this innate understanding that life was more about impact than it was about income. And I think
Mm,
that, and realizing that whatever you have, right, even if that gift is being a musician, or whether it's writing poetry or whatever it is, if you notice that is not meant to serve you. I mean, like, what are you going to do? Sit there and sing to yourself, or read the poetry to yourself? Obviously, everything we have is meant to be given to someone else, right? To be a blessing to someone.
mm.
So it's someone else that needs to hear that music, right? And enjoy, what you wrote, or read the poetry and enjoy what you wrote. And so I think just realizing that, understanding that whatever gift or talent or whatever it is that you have, it's meant to be given, right? And when you are focused on doing your best, and making sure that you're delivering it in the best way that you can, and you're giving the to the best of your ability. Within that service, the money comes.
Mm,
That should be the first focus is fine-tuning your craft and making sure that what you're giving is the best, and it's being delivered with the best service. And I think if you just focus on the impact that your gift or talent is having or your business is having, the money follows that.
mm. And so obviously, retiring at 30 was a phenomenal achievement that I think many people would love to reach that milestone themselves. But you had a lot of ups and downs. So can we actually take this learning that you had around, I'm not going to just go make somebody else rich. I am going to serve myself, my future, serve my future and have control of my future. And one of those moments where you experienced homelessness.
Oh, yeah. A couple of times, actually. So I done a lot of different types of businesses because, like I said, I've been in business since elementary school. So it started out with me helping the kids to monetize whatever they did. And then I used to sew. So I started out making like decorative pillows, and I would make like the round pillows in the different shapes. And then I taught myself how to build websites to market the pillows. And then I started doing that and helping people launch their businesses, but then also doing the branding, the graphic design, building their websites, things like that. So over the years, I had the opportunity to do so many different types of businesses. I was an event planner. I had I did cakes, did because I just had so many different talents. ATM businesses, ATM machines rather, Airbnbs, pretty much everything you can think of. I did, everything did not go as smoothly, as I thought. And I think people think that in entrepreneurship, success just kind of happens and they don't realize that real success is really on the other side of failure. You have to be willing to fail to really see a lot of success. So there were some businesses that didn't go that well, right? So, and I ended up homeless 3 times, ended up losing everything 11 times, having to rebuild. But each time, I think that's what helped me fine tune everything, because all of the other businesses that I was doing that were kind of like brick and mortar businesses, that's when I kind of just chucked all of those to the side and I said, no, I need to focus on passive income businesses. I need to focus on things that once I establish it and do it, it continues to pay me residually for the rest of my life. And then I also wanted to structure it in a way that even if somebody came in and had no money, they could rebuild, because I had to rebuild so many times. And so that's what allowed me to just kind of focus on what I do now, which is my program that helps you build wealth from nothing, but focused on passive income. So,
So, what led you? I guess let's talk about that moment, the moment that you switched from the past businesses that you had to now I'm going to come up with a passive income solution. What was that? What was the rock bottom of that moment?
let's say, well, besides sitting in a homeless shelter,
Well, no, yeah, no, but no, that's not besides like that. I think is really relevant. I
yeah,
mean, I don't, a lot of people haven't had this experience. So, yeah, what was happening?
I think it was the frustration of also having to like keep rebuilding. That's the thing.
Mm.
I think it's one thing to build something and lose it, or to try a certain business and it doesn't work out. But I think having to constantly rebuild was the catalyst for me, because it's like, okay, so this time when I rebuild, I need to make sure that it's structured in a way that it's sustainable for life, right? And that I'll never have to be in this position again. But also, it wasn't just me too. It was kind of like I want to structure this in a way where I can literally pick up a homeless person off the street and they can implement this and do the same thing. Because I wanted to
Mm.
use my path to create something that would be sustainable. It was that looking at basically everything I had done, but then also how can I take this and turn it into a program that anybody else can use, and I can kind of be, like the one that's kind of cutting the path for them, so to speak.
And at this time, what had you lost? I suppose what was the last business that you had been running, and did you have a family at the time that you were supporting? And what was like the emotional side of this situation when you're sitting in the homeless shelter saying, "What am I doing this time?"
Oh yeah, I think emotionally, I think it's one of the rockiest, roads that you can be on, especially just, being someone that kind of holds myself to a really high standard. I think sometimes you're harder on yourself, right, than other people are. And And then also the psychological warfare of just when you have not just failed, but failed several times, right? There is this idea trying to cement itself to make you believe that you are a failure, right? Not
Mm.
just, oh, this business failed or that business failed and that business failed, but it was a psychological warfare of just, oh, I'm not a failure. Okay, so these things failed, but how can I use this now to build something that will not necessarily never fail, but essentially be structured in a way that it doesn't again?
Well, that's actually, I mean, a real profound moment that you had there. And I'm curious how you worked through that. How did you separate that just because an idea didn't sustain, maybe it was even successful for a while, right? Before it failed. But just because an idea didn't sustain, that's not a reflection of my capability. Like, how did you really go through that?
Well, I would definitely say listening to a lot of stories, testimonies of other people. I think a lot of times, when we're in these situations, you tend to feel like I'm the only one this has ever happened to, right? And you forget there's a whole world of people out there that probably you're not the only one. So I think not just my relationship with God, but also just going and watching other stories, like listening to the 401 story, like Formula 401. The reason why it's called 401 is because they got the formula wrong 400 times. Okay, finally got it right at 401. Now we have the formula, right? So just going back and listening to stories like that and understanding that success is on the other side of doesn't matter how many failures, but you really just only have to get it right one time. It's kind of like the person who's applying for jobs and they're getting frustrated, like, oh, I can't find a job. I'm applying for 100 jobs. You only need one to say yes. And it's the same thing. It's like you only need one successful business to take care of you for the rest of your life. Why would you quit? I don't care how many times you have to keep restarting.
No, that's really amazing. And how did you come across even the concept of passive income at that time? Had you seen it in some of these people you were looking at who succeeded, or how did you arrive at maybe this is the path I should take next?
Because I had done so many different types of businesses, I had tried some different businesses that were passive income, and then that's when I realized, okay, I want to do this, and just get rid of all the brick and mortar stuff, like having the ATM business. That's a really, really good, easy way to build passive income, right? Without really having a lot of debt. Because one ATM machine can cash flow you by the same thing as a property, but without all of the liability that comes with owning a property. So that was one of the businesses that kind of allowed me to taste a little bit of that passive income. And then rental arbitrage with Airbnbs. That was another one that kind of allowed me to taste some passive income. Author 3 books now, the royalties from that. That was another way that I was able to taste passive income. I had my first invention as well. So royalties from that as well. So yeah, it's just actually, it's kind of like you taste a little bit of it. It's like, wait, how much more of this can I get?
How can I actually systematize this?
Right.
And so when you were in this moment, what other options were you debating? Before you landed on, I've got maybe the passive income, I'm going to, be able to monetize this and I'll be able to now have something more enduring. What other things were you looking at and exploring at that time?
I was exploring really just going back to corporate America. Really,
Mhm.
because I mean, I was always very good at sales, just naturally. And I think it's just because I understood service and also I could gain people's trust, just very, very.
Mm.
And so even when I did work in corporate America and worked in sales, I was always like, top salesperson just because of that. So I considered just, hey, maybe I should just forget all this stuff and just go back to work. But it just wasn't natural for me.
No, and I mean, I think that says a lot that that was one of the options you were considering since you had spent so many years not doing that. That says that you were at a point where it was really difficult. Were there other people who were at stake at that time? Are you married or any family? Okay.
Not married at all. I do have a son, so
Mm.
he's older now. He's off in the Navy now, but yeah, I did have a son. So yeah, that was, when he was young, I think a lot of that during the time that I was, homeless and all of that. So, but the great thing is he was able to like be with his dad sometimes and be with me because his dad was in the military. So yeah.
And so, how did he come into your thinking then when you were looking at your options?
I mean, also just making sure that I would be able to actually leave him the inheritance, that I wanted to and, not leave him with debt or whatever else. So I think that was important as well. And then also making sure that by the time he got to college age, that that would be paid for and all of that. So all of those things came into play as well.
Yeah, it's a lot to work through when you have other people dependent on you. We often, comes up on this show how taking risks in your 20s is a lot easier because you don't necessarily have all of those things that you might have at 30, and so it makes the stakes a lot higher the more dependent people that you have dependent on you, or the more you have to lose.
Yeah.
Did you have anybody that you were able to go to during this time where you were able to talk about your situation and about your ideas and the path you wanted to take? Did you have advisors or anybody you could turn to?
Not really. Not really. I had besides the people that I would watch, like a lot of the stories that I would listen to. As far as like mentors, I would say I had, like spiritual mentors, my pastors and people like that, of just kind of looking at being able to, and then I had a friend of mine also who is a pastor, but he's much, much older. He's probably like in his 80s. So he's one that I would like call to ask us. I'm like, you've been around for a long time. So I can kind of trust if you tell me something, you kind of been around the block, so people like that in my life that I would consider mentors, but a lot of them were people that I kind of watched online, more so than having a relationship with.
And how would you say then that your faith impacted your path at this point? What were you drawing on when you were at this point where you felt pretty low and you had failed a few times?
I was definitely drawing on the vision that I know that God had shown me because when I was younger, I had just like a crazy, like accurate gift of, being able to tell when things were going to happen in the future. Like it would like freak my parents out. Because I mean, literally, like we'll be like, imagine like I'm 3, 4 years old and the adults are having a conversation. And I'm like, by the way, Uncle Sammy's gonna die next week. And then he actually does. So like it was like super creepy. But like but it would be very accurate because I would like all of the dreams that I would have would come to pass. So I knew that there were a lot of things that in my future that I had to get to. And I knew that if I just didn't give up and kept going, that I would get there.
Wow. And so do you find that that intuition has been helpful for you in making these decisions then?
Very much so. Yes.
Mm. So can you remember the exact moment that you decided, okay, I'm going to go in on this passive income. I have all this capability and now I can actually monetize my experience. Do you remember that moment? And if so, can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so it was actually during the time when I retired. So once I retired, I moved to Panama. So I left the States. And I'm telling you, I think it was probably the best decision I've ever made because I think being in the United States is just there's so much hustle and bustle and it's just and I kind of wanted to unplug from that. And there's just something powerful about just when you unplug from everything, it's almost like you can see everything from a different perspective. It kind of allows you to kind of step back and kind of just reassess everything. It was during that time that I was able to really just in the peace and the quiet of being in Panama and just, the no hustle and bustle. Everybody's kind of just da 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 da. Things just kind of move at their own slow pace. Um, that I was able to just really sit down and just build these structures and test them out.
So it sounds like you probably had to say no to quite a bit then in order to say yes to this. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, no, in the sense of just, I guess, leaving the United States
Mm.
and pretty much everybody that I knew here. And of course, I'm kind of petite too. So like, you're going to a whole nother country by yourself. Like it's all of that. And then it's a Spanish speaking country. And I don't speak a lick of Spanish, right? So I'm using like Google translate for everything. But I think that was probably the hardest part because literally it's I was leaving everything I knew, right? So, but it was also amazing because it's like you get time to yourself. And I think that's what a lot of people miss out on because a lot of times when you're a leader or you're a giver and you're someone that people look up to, there's always people pulling on you and you don't really get a lot of time to sit to yourself, right? And just really just have that time to introspect. And I got that. Yeah. And sometimes it may even feel selfish to like, oh, I have all these people that need me, but you need that.
And so did you use that time in any sort of structured way, or was it just you let things come to you as they come?
It was structured. It was just I was able to now focus in a whole nother way than I could before without any pressure. Without any pressure, there's nobody pulling on me. There's nobody doing anything. I didn't have a team anymore. It was just me, right? So it was structured, but it was also just birthed out of that alone time.
And can you share some of that structure then that you went through?
So when I say structure, I'm talking about so the program that I have is called Generous Equipped. Is basically where the foundation of it is basically you start with three trusts. So we have a business trust, then we have a family trust, and then you have a nonprofit trust. So, and then typically what you do is we start with the nonprofit because for me, it's always impact over income. So you find that thing that you want to have impact with. So usually I will talk to my clients and see whatever it is. And some of them may say, hey, I've always wanted to open up a home for, people that are getting off drugs or, for veterans, or I've always wanted to feed the homeless, whatever that thing is that has impact. We start with that first. So we start with the nonprofit trust first. And then what we do is we start getting grant funding for the nonprofit. Okay. Get you qualified for the $10,000 a month Google ad grant. Of course, we have to get the nonprofit status first, which usually takes the longest amount of time for the IRS. And then with that grant funding, now typically you're going to pay yourself a salary, right, from your nonprofit. So let's say if your salary is 50,000 for the year, what we'll do is you'll pay yourself that in one chunk. So you take the whole 50,000 now and you hold it in an IUL policy inside of your family trust. And then, so now you have the 50,000 growing in the IUL policy, but then you pull 50,000 from the death benefit of the policy. And then now you take that and establish an endowment fund for the nonprofit. And then once that is going and everything's running, then we go to the business trust and we do the same thing and we start getting business grids for the business trust. And then you pay yourself the same way from your business trust, put that money also in your IUL policy in the family trust, and then pull the same money again out of the death benefit and continue to grow the endowment fund. So the goal is to get the endowment fund to where you can live, well, 5% of the interest annually from that is enough to cover your annual budget for your nonprofit. And that's
Wow.
when it becomes sustainable because essentially universities are able to be sustainable from those endowment funds. That's how they're able to stay open for generations. So the difference is we're doing an endowment fund for the nonprofit, the thing that you're having impact with. Because once you have enough in there to where 5% of the annual interest covers your annual budget for your nonprofit. Now you can just use your donations to continue to grow the fund.
And so were you actually setting this up for yourself, or were you just documenting this as a concept in order to monetize it to other people?
No, I started it with myself first, and that's how I was able to rebuild. And then I just got to fine tune it and fine tune it and fine tune it, to kind of make it easy because with the way that it's structured, even if somebody came from a homeless shelter, you can still find something you want to have impact with and start a nonprofit and get grant funding. You don't have to, you're a human being and you're breathing, you can pretty much do that. So that's also why it's structured that way because I know a lot of times people could be coming from the same place that I was, right? Or maybe they had a divorce and they're starting completely over. How can they still rebuild without having a rich uncle, to give him that money.
And so when you look across, we started with when you were 10 and then talking about your final pivot. Is there like one principle you think really guides you through all of this?
One thing that I say all the time, this is kind of my motto, is, if you live this life and you don't fulfill the purpose that you were placed in the earth for, you have not lived, you have only existed. So for me, purpose is the biggest thing. It's like, what were you deployed in this earth to do? It was not just to eat, drink, pay bills, and die. It can't be that. So I think finding that thing that you would do even if it didn't pay you, right? That thing that it and a lot of my clients notice too, once they start doing like their nonprofit or whatever that passion is, it's like it's just so fulfilling. Like even if it didn't make you as much money as you did in corporate America, like it's so fulfilling. There's something about human nature that You are fulfilled out of knowing that you're serving others in whatever capacity it is. So I think finding that thing that you were placed in the earth to use to impact other people's lives, if you find that and you fulfill that, I think everything else falls into place.
How do you help somebody know if they've found their purpose, or are there signals that they, can hear or feel that then they know they're on the right track?
Yeah, actually, I have my second book is called Purpose Navigator because I kept getting that question over and over on my live streams. How do I find my purpose? So I was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to write a 90-day guide that you just follow page by page to find your purpose. But essentially, you just ask yourself several questions. What are some things that people told you that you were good at? Okay, there's one thing to think you're good at something. It's another thing for somebody else to tell you, somebody else other than your mother, right? To tell you,
Mhm.
hey, I think you're really good at this. I think you're a really good singer. I think I really like your apple pies, whatever it is. So really sitting down and thinking about what are some things that I've actually gotten real compliments about that people actually appreciate that I do well, that I do better than the average, then writing some of those things down. And then also going back even to your childhood. What are some of the things that you actually enjoy doing? Because a lot of times when we begin to adult, which I don't believe in adulting, I'm a big kid. So when we begin to adult, sometimes we forget all those little things that we really enjoy doing as children. And
Mm.
some of those things can bring insight into what you should be doing now. For example, there are a lot of people who, when they were children, they would line their brothers and sisters up and go to the board and teach, right? Like they're pretending like they're a teacher. That's insight on what you should be doing now as an adult. But a lot of times we forget those things. So going back and kind of just looking at, okay, what are some of the things that I just naturally did, what I didn't know about life or responsibilities or anything like that, sitting down and thinking about those things. And then also looking at some of the things that you've gotten some real compliments about, and then being realistic with yourself about what is it that I'm actually good at. And then we kind of start from there.
And so, what do you think somebody would say if they disagreed with you around maybe following this purpose-driven career, whether it be entrepreneurial or work? If somebody disagreed with you, what do you think they would be saying?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe some people they think that money is more important than than the impact that you're having. But I mean, you're free to disagree. But at the end of the day, I think if you live long enough, you will come to find that, when is if you had one day left to live, what's gonna be more important, right? Is it the impact that you've had on the lives of the people that are around you, or is it the amount of numbers that are in your bank account? Because at the end of the day, everybody knows what really matters.
And so, did you, when you made this decision to launch this next business, did you have any naysayers? Did you have anybody who didn't see the vision?
No, because there was nobody around. Got rid of all of those. But I mean, the great thing is though, I've been really, just blessed to have a lot of friends, just even from business and different things that have just been very genuine and authentic people. So I've had good counsel around me and a lot of people even that are much older than me, too, that I can kind of draw wisdom from. And I think I also take really, really value that too. For me, I think my relationships are so important to me because I understand the value of wise counsel, right? And having people that are much older that can speak into what it is that you're doing. So I always try to make sure I have those as well. So I don't really listen to a lot of naysayers, so to speak.
It's good to surround yourself with advisors that you can trust and, like you said, counsel. So, when you're sitting there in Panama and you're going down this path and you have this vision, what didn't go as planned?
Well, trying to see, there wasn't really anything there because it's just such a laid back place that you can't really go wrong there. Which is the reason why I'm probably like right now I'm in San Diego just doing some things pertaining to mortgage notes. But more than likely, I'm probably going to buy a house in Panama too. But because I do still want to retire there, but I do also want to live in some other countries too because there are some other places like Bangkok and other places that seem pretty cool to live in. But I don't think there was anything really in that choice that didn't go right, besides the fact that I can't speak Spanish.
But what about in the business? I mean, did the business go off how you planned it exactly, or it did?
Yes,
Okay.
it did.
And what do you attribute that to?
I attribute that to getting rid of all the noise, really getting rid of all the noise and just, like, fine-tuning and focusing.
Hmm. And so do you look back and attribute anything to circumstance or luck, or is it judgment and following the the purpose that you were given?
Well, definitely, I don't believe in luck. I've just seen too much in my life to believe in luck. I think that when we even look at the fact that we're in the earth, right, and just the way that everything is just so intricately made, it points to there being a good outcome for everyone. I think if you stick with it long enough, you're going to see that good outcome. Because then one of the things that I say to my students is, when you even look at the earth, it's been sitting on its axis for how many generations? Hasn't fallen off, you know? And what makes you think that your life is just going to remain in a place, even if you're in a place right now where you feel like you've fallen off the horse, right? If you stick with it long enough, things just tend to correct themselves. And I do believe that
Mm.
God, who is in place and who has the earth on his axis, and if he can do that, he can make sure that everything else comes into alignment in your life too.
And so would if you had to start over again tomorrow or something for some reason, like how do you think you would approach your next decision? Like what are the steps you would take when you're looking if you had to make another decision like this at some point?
I would do the exact same things that I'm teaching my students in my program. That's literally, I would start with a nonprofit, right? Get grant funding for it and, start marketing that and do the same plan. Because like I said, I've been in different types of businesses and this is the fastest way to rebuild and then rebuild it in a way that is sustainable.
But do you think you would isolate yourself again and think through like what type of nonprofit should it be or how do you think you'd work through that?
I kind of now I have it kind of built into my life where I have this thing where it's like if I can have all of this impact, but I need to make sure that I'm also having fun while I'm having that impact. So I'm always having retreats for my clients. I'm always taking a retreat every time I can. So I've kind of built in that one-on-one time in with having the impact. So now I'm just naturally doing it.
And do you find that at the base of most of your critical decisions is that driver of purpose?
Yes, yes, that is the main driver, is always impact over income, because at the end of the day, the real legacy that you leave is how many lives did you impact? That's really that's all that's going to matter.
And if somebody were to find themselves into this similar situation as you, what might be the most likely mistake that they would make?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is internalizing things and reflecting our failures onto our values or onto the value of who we are, onto our own value, and understanding that life is going to life, right? Regardless of who you are, regardless of how gifted you are, regardless of how maybe even not talented you are, regardless of whether you're an idiot, it doesn't matter. Life is still going to life. So, and definitely do not take any failures and put them upon yourself and call yourself a failure, because there are a lot of things that you can try that can fail. But at the end of the day, failure is a part of life. I think just not internalizing it is the biggest thing, because in everything we do, before you learn how to walk, you had to fall a couple of times. When you were riding a bike, you had to fall off a couple of times. It's a part of life, it's part of learning, and we cannot internalize failure.
And does when you are in those, I guess, moments of failure, because that's really hard, right? Not to be like I think you said something about the mental challenges of having to work through that. How did that concept of purpose, or did the concept of purpose help you overcome any of that feeling of failure, or did you tap into something else at that point?
Yeah, so the purpose, because I also knew, just from having a close relationship with God, that there were so many people whose lives were dependent on me succeeding. And I think that was the thing that kept me going, because I knew, okay, if I don't get this right and get to this destination, there are going to be so many other people who want to leave their 9 to 5s or want to build wealth, who are not going to be able to get to that destination, because these are the people that I'm called to, right? We all have our own impact on whatever corner of the world we're in. So I knew that there were people that were dependent on me, and and they were my purpose, essentially, right? My legacy will be all of the lives that I've changed, all the people that I've helped walk away from their 9 to 5. And so that's what kept me going. I think when you get to a place where it's not just about you, right? But there are other people dependent on you. Um, the love from that is what pushes you, beyond what you're even naturally able to do. It's kind of like, the story of the woman whose baby got stuck under the truck and she lifts up the entire truck to get her baby off. Why? Because in love, when we move in love, we get this just extra supernatural strength that we did not have before.
So your decision driver is really around purpose. And one of the purposes you identified early was I'm going to build for myself and not build for others. And then you overcame lots of moments of failure and didn't internalize it or didn't, let it own your identity, I think would be the way to say it. Is there anything else thematic that you'd like to point out on your journey?
I think that's pretty much the heart of it, and I think just emphasizing love and giving, and, when that becomes your heart posture and your focus, I feel like everything else, does come into alignment. I think a lot of times life hardens us, right? Like all of the different punches and things that kind of life gives you, whether it's rejection or abuse and different things that may have happened in your life or people betraying you or whatever it is, it kinda hardens you, and I think a lot of time people don't take the time to heal from that, to be
Mm.
free to love again, to love with the same amount of passion, and that was another thing. Like, when you lose, are you restarting with the same amount of passion this time, right? That's also the hardest thing to do. So I think, if it's gonna be anything else, it would be love, and making
Mm.
sure that you're always in a place where you're loving just as hard as you were,
Mm.
regardless of what you've been through.
Oh, this has been a really inspiring story, Patience. What would be one thing you want to leave top of mind with people?
Uh, just, know that you don't have to be working 2, 3, 4 jobs, and you don't the 9 to 5 is not the only way. There's a lot of different ways that you can establish passive income, and it's real. You can actually do it because I think a lot of times people don't think it's realistic. It's very real. Obviously, if there are other people doing it, obviously it can be done, and I think, you know, give yourself at least the gift of trying it and, just see where it goes.
Well, that's great. If somebody wanted to follow your work then or learn, read your books, where would they do that?
They can go to patiencedean.com, and that's kind of my hub for everything, just like my name is spelled on the screen, patiencedean.com, and then that way, if they wanna go to, like, my ministry website, they can go there. It kinda has everything. It has, information about my hedge fund if they wanna invest in that. It has information about, I think there's one that's called, there's patiencedeanfinance.com, which, that's the one that's the private wealth club. So if they're interested in, leaving their 9 to 5, building passive income, they go to patiencedean.com. They can just click on the one that says private wealth club, and then they can learn about that.
That's great. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. And to our listeners, make the decision, act on it, be accountable, and until next time, stay unstoppable.